In this video, I want to share with you my plans for my next custom bike build. I just finished this bike, which was my first ever custom bike project. And it started as a BMW R80-7 from 1978, which I picked up in the south of Germany at the end of 2020. Looking back at the beginning of the project, I have to say I was very naive going into it. I was still full-time studying and never ever customized a motorcycle before. And because of that, I underestimated about everything there was to be estimated. Time, money, and above all, skills. At the beginning of this project, I didn't have any skills that were required to build a custom bike like this. But exactly that was also my motivation for the project, because at the end of my bachelor's degree, I noticed that I actually really want to work with motorcycles and not sit in an office all day. So I had applied at 30 motorcycle workshops for an apprenticeship, which in Germany normally takes 3 years, and it's more for like young adults that are like 16 to 18 years old. But I had applied anyways, and I thought I would at least get one. But all of the 30 declined me, and their reasoning was that I had already finished my bachelor's degree. I was so disappointed, but at the same time, I thought this can't stop me. So I looked for ways how I could actually teach myself, and building a custom bike from scratch seemed like a relatively good option. As I said, I was very naive. Well, it was a very good option, but I didn't know anything about it. So taking the bike apart was still relatively easy, and that was done in about 3 days. But soon after, I realized that the progress from here will be very, very hard. I started to make some cardboard templates and tried to make my first parts from metal, but I failed horribly. And I noticed that I need to learn the fundamentals. And the main skill that I wanted to learn, but that also scared me quite a lot, was welding. So I looked online and found this guy who did online TIG welding courses.
Now let's talk about some options when it comes to cups. I'm going to be using a number 6 alumina cup on my torch. These are very commonly used with aluminum TIG welding, and getting people going anywhere from a number 6 to a number 8 cup is going to be perfect.
So I bought his course and practiced for 2 months in my little gardening shed until I could properly TIG weld. And that was the point when the project properly started. Welding opened up so many possibilities. I made my own fenders, my own battery box. I could make little brackets, anything that I wanted. But at the same time, the more complex the projects became, the harder it was to actually make prototypes for them from cardboard. So I looked for alternatives and found that 3D printing might actually be a viable option for prototyping. That's when I got into 3D modeling and got my first very entry-level 3D printer. But even with this cheap printer, I could now quickly make prototypes, print them, test them, adjust them, and then once they are properly done, I could make them from metal. That helped me out a lot, because that is how I made the speedo bracket. That's also how I made the fork guards on the upper parts of the BMW forks. The printer over the project became one of my most used tools. And not only for prototyping, but now I was also able to make my own tools that would otherwise be very expensive or not even available. So over time, I built up this toolbox of skills that gave me the confidence to always keep pushing my limits to achieve the highest quality possible. And I'm super happy with how the bike turned out. But in the end, unfortunately, I couldn't actually enjoy the bike because the project has taken me so much longer. And the day that I actually rode the bike out of my small gardening shed in the countryside of northern Germany, that was also the day that I had to move to a different country. I thought this project would be done in 4 months, but in the end, it took me 4 years to finish this bike. And my wife has already been working in the States for a year, and it was finally time that I would follow her. So the same day I finished this bike, I packed my most valuable tools into a moving box and flew across the Atlantic Ocean to the state of Virginia. 16 hours later, I was waiting at the conveyor belt, and unfortunately, my tools never showed up. But I went home, and the next day they were delivered to our porch. So I was very happy, because that would have been a very expensive box to lose. And now I can finally show you what will be my next workshop for our next custom bike project. Welcome to the new workshop. Well, at the moment it looks more like an ordinary garage, but we're gonna get to that. I already bought some supplies so we can make it look nice. But first I want to tell you what we're actually gonna build in here. because the BMW is going to stay back in Germany with my brother-in-law. So I definitely need a bike for the time while I'm here, which is perfect because that means we have a new project that we can build. And at first I was so overwhelmed because I have so many ideas in my head for bikes that I want to build at some point, but I would say 99% of those ideas wouldn't be legal at all in Germany. And now here in the States, most of them are legal. So I was overwhelmed like a kid in a candy store. But at the same time, I have to consider a few lessons that I learned when building the BMW, and also our life situation right now in the States isn't super stable. So I have 5 parameters that I need to or want to consider when it comes to the next project. The first one, and that is also the biggest one, is time. While I wish that we could stay for as long as we wanted, Paula's contract ends in September. She's already working on getting it extended so that we can stay here. But the reality is that I don't know where we're going to be at the end of the year. So I need to find a project that goes a lot quicker than the BMW. I'm aiming for 3 to 4 months so that I can enjoy the bike through the summer, but we'll see how that goes. To make that possible, we have a second parameter, which is skills. So I want to choose a project that doesn't require skills that are super far out there. I want something that I can build with the skills that I have acquired through the BMW project. But at the same time, I don't want it to be like a buy parts and bolt them on and, I don't know, call it a day project. I enjoy the challenge. I want something that is challenging me, where I can learn something new. So I also want a project, and that is parameter 3, where I have one good challenge, one big one, not like so many big ones, but one big one where I can learn something new. So that's the first 3. The fourth one is budget. And that is one that I learned from the BMW. At first I felt relatively good on track with the BMW, but towards the end it got more and more expensive and I overspent a bit, let's say. That is also due to my perfectionism. I just can't go with like cheap, crappy parts, and I wanted this bike to be the highest standard possible. So I'm okay with that, but that also means that for this one we have a budget of 5K that we need to stick to. And some might say, oh, that's a lot of money, but I noticed that it adds up a lot quicker than you might think. And I also want to build a bike that feels high quality, that is high quality, because parameter number 5 is that I want to build a bike that I actually enjoy. I want to build a bike that I'm really excited for to build, but also to ride it afterwards. And that cancelled out one of my very first ideas of building a very, very cheap bike on a very tight budget just to make it a challenge, which probably would have been fun, but I just noticed through the BMW project and also now thinking about what I want to ride afterwards, that is not me. I don't like when parts like feel flimsy, when parts feel cheap, when stuff doesn't work. So we're gonna build something that is actually very nice and a lot of fun, hopefully, when we ride it. So that brings us to 3 options that I had in my selection process. Option A is probably the one that most of you would like to see, and that is a CB750 Cafe Racer. With the CB750, my main challenge would be a complete engine rebuild. I think that would be the perfect project for an engine rebuild because there are so many like resources and videos out there that I could follow that would make it easier, because if you have followed the BMW build, I didn't touch the engine too much because when I started I was afraid, then I didn't have time. So it's something that I feel I left on the table and something that I definitely want to get into. But it takes a lot of time and patience and also tools and money to do that properly. So that would be my one challenge. And with a time restraint, I think I don't really have the time to do it the way that I would like to do it. So I'm gonna save that project for a time when our living situation is a little bit more stable. That brings me to option 2, which is also a cafe racer, but that wouldn't require an engine rebuild as the one challenge, because it has a very unique base. A while ago, I saw this build called Project 7 of a low-slung, super loud Harley-Davidson cafe racer, something that is very irrational. And for some reason, I do like impractical and irrational bikes. So that is a project that absolutely speaks to my heart. Something that is rowdy, unusual, a little bit unpractical, but also a bike that has character, where you can feel the engine, like with the BMW Boxer engine, where you can feel the bike working. that is something that I really enjoy. And also it would never be legal in Germany, so that was my first choice for a very long time. But when I arrived here and drove around in our car on these streets, I noticed that they are, at least compared to Germany, pretty rough. And I reconsidered the whole idea of building a cafe racer here because I really want to enjoy it and like ride a little bit and discover the area. So I need something that is fun for more than 20 miles. I want something that has a little bit better suspension. So I kept thinking of how I could combine these two things. Good suspension, but the same vibe like a rowdy bike. And I did some research, and that's when I found out about the Harley-Davidson class at the Mint 400 Desert Race. Look at this.
In the months and weeks leading up to the 2020 Mint 400, the hooligan racers each began to piece together their custom Harley bike builds in hopes of surviving the treacherous Las Vegas desert. Each racer had a slightly different strategy when it came to weight, power, suspension, and handling. The entire group of hooligan class racers came up with some of the most unique and ridiculous Frankenstein bike builds in the history of desert racing.
I mean, you can disagree, but for me, this seems like the perfect project for the States. On the one hand, it's never gonna be legal in Germany to do this. I do like these high, tall bikes because I have a KTM Supermoto at home and I really enjoy this type of riding. It's gonna be a bike that can definitely handle all of the streets around here, gonna be very fun, and also present the right amount of challenge. My one big challenge with this project will be the fork swap, but we have so many other projects that we need to do. I'm gonna convert the wheels to spoked wheels and change the sizes. We're gonna have a chain conversion. I probably also have to fabricate my own foot peg mounting points, and there are gonna be so many more projects. But before we can start with all of the exciting stuff, we need to find a base bike. So a Sportster that is suitable for like this build. And that's what we're gonna do in next week's episode. So hit the follow button if you want to be part of this Harley-Davidson Sportster off-road build journey. And then I'm gonna see you in the next one. I'm very excited.